Welcome to the Make Your Brain Happy podcast, hosted by Veronique Cardone, MS, the podcast where you'll learn how to live your life to its fullest potential. This is for anyone who's interested in the science of the brain or wants to seize the power of positive thinking, enhanced mental performance, and a healthy lifestyle.
Hi, this is the number 3 podcast, Make Your Brain Happy with Veronique Cardone. And today I'm so excited. Our guest is Aly Cohen, a doctor with many levels of expertise. Welcome to the podcast. Today we're talking about the impact of chemicals on your life, on your health, on your brain. It's frightening. But I'm sure that Aly, I'm excited because Aly has so many great insights and ideas. So Dr. Aly Cohen is a board-certified rheumatologist, and she's also an integrative medicine specialist. She's also an environmental health expert, and she collaborates with the EWG, which is the Environmental Working Group. All those complicated words for a French-speaking woman. And you've also been collaborating with Cancer Schmancer, right?
That's
But you're doing a lot of things. You have co-edited a book that was published a few years ago, Integrative Environmental Medicine, with Dr. Frederick von Saal, with Dr. Weil as well, right? And in 2015, you created, and we're going to talk about it later, The Smart Human, your passion. You've been a TED Talk speaker last year. We're going to talk about this later as well. And you have written a new book. I don't know when this book is going to be published. I think it's soon, right?
September 8th, I believe, is the pub date.
Oh my God, we're really getting very close. So the new book is Non-Toxic Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World. So let me ask you, Aly, from rheumatologist to integrative medicine expert to all the things you've done to the founder of The Smart Human, what has driven you to evolve this way?
Well, I laid this out in the TED Talk because I thought the best way to explain how I got to where I am is really just telling my story, which is usually pretty compelling if it involves, some real heartstrings. And it did, because I had my dog had gotten sick, and for all of our pet lovers out there, we know that our pets are our babies, and so that kind of when he became sick and I started to explore what may have made him sick, what have caused him sick, contamination of water, dog food treats, pesticides in our area, our farmland area where we live in New Jersey, which is obviously one of the most pesticide laden states in the country. I really became concerned in why this dog was ill. And what ended up unfolding was all of the regulations that I had never known were non-existent or weren't strong enough to have any real health benefits in terms or protections for our health. And I was kind of shocked to the point where I was looking around reading this material and being like, are you serious? Are you serious? And it also reflects on the fact that there's such a dearth of education on this information in medical schools, be it nutrition, as you're well aware, as well as environmental health, which is by definition how environment affects human health. Whether it's plasticizing chemicals, whether it's personal care product chemicals that are on pots and pans to make them non-stick, waterproofing chemicals, flame retardant chemicals, chemicals in our food for flavoring and coloring and preservatives, chemicals in our water, our drinking water, which people don't know much about, which I hope to get to today. So again, we're sort of bombarded by chemicals in every aspect of our lives because we've allowed it, and the government has allowed it. And now we have to sort of take that control back and learn how to remove them, how to avoid them, how to not buy them. And that's where I'm at now. And with the book coming up, Non-Toxic Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World, I take people along on my journey of what I'm discovering, what I did discover, what I am discovering. And my co-author, Dr. Frederick von Saal, is just absolutely brilliant, renowned bench researcher who was largely responsible for removing bisphenol A, or BPA, from baby bottles in 2012, along with his colleagues, of course, but he is really the international researcher in that area. So, we put our brains together, our generational perspectives together. He's a regulatory guy. I'm a clinician on the front lines taking care of patients. And I really think we put together something usable, friendly, and hopefully enjoyable. I mean enjoyable, really, because it's not scary the way we laid it out in terms of what to do.
Well, this is going to be really welcome, because this is really needed, because it's very intimidating with all those acronyms. So I was just reading, according to a report from the United Nations, that in the last 50 years, we have increased the number of chemicals in our lives by 300 times. So do you have a couple of scary numbers to share with us? I know, I would like to hear about statistics, because I think that we need to realize that we are really invaded by chemicals.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much since, the 1950s, after World War II, is when we really had this explosion of chemical production. And it was really, an exciting time. And it was really in regards to food preservation and how could we package food in cans to last longer so they wouldn't go to waste when the country was really struggling financially. We learned about, pesticides were developed, many of them during that time, because of soldiers going into areas where they had mosquitoes and other types of infectious agents. So, there was a lot of good that came out of the 1950s in terms of creativity and materials like naugahyde and plexiglass and rayon. The list just goes on, melamine, the list goes on and on. But what's since come of that time period is that we had an explosion that was sort of unbridled. And, the regulatory constraints were very limited, if none. And no one was really thinking about how these chemicals might leach out of products that we've created and kind of make their way into our food that, in our food containers and our cookware, and so it was kind of like a wild, wild west. And so now we have over 90,000 commercial industrial chemicals that are used in all of our products, not just stuff like computer casing, cable wires, personal care products, but in our food. So in many of these chemicals actually cross over not only in our food, they're in our cosmetics, or they're in our couches and they're in our cosmetics. So the chemical industry has gotten quite creative in infusing those chemicals into products.
But they also are in our food.
Oh yeah.
Right, they are in the fish. The fish now in the ocean is full of mercury and BPA, but also plastic now. And
yeah.
The water that falls from the sky, I guess, is bringing chemicals even to the food we are growing organically.
That is correct. And so, we are now seeing, and why I embrace the concept of environmental health, not just teeing it off to sustainability and greening our oceans and our planet, but we have to green our bodies. And yes. The full circle, the full story of what we're doing to our environment and how it's coming right back to bite us in the arse is that we have to really think about all the different places we can stop the production and invasion. And, some of it is not buying it, but that also leads to market changes. The market works off of finances, and being the change that uses your finances, your wallet, to change the market is really critical. And it's also part of why I try to teach high school students, and I'm working to get this into high school curriculum nationally, is because we have an army of young, empowered, bright, capable people who really can get out there and vote. They can vote with their dollars. They can look up products to decide what they put on, in, and around their bodies. And so not just looking at adults, parents, grandparents, medical colleagues, but really going to younger people who really can have the most health effects. Eventually, that's what we want. We want people to be healthy and stay healthy from these chemicals.
So tell me about your amazing initiative to teach kids in schools. And I was listening to your TED Talk, and I did not realize that adolescents are the biggest consumers of beauty products and enhancers or whatever, because they are so, into the way they look. I didn't know that. So what is the reaction when you educate them?
Well, it was really a gamble when I first came up with the idea. And as I mentioned in the talk, I was lecturing to doctors for about 3 years, like 30 talks at big medical departments. And I really didn't get I didn't see, the interest there. I mean, people were not following me after the talks to say, how can I change out plastics in the NICU and neonatal ICUs where there's a big contamination in infants of chemicals from those plastics. I didn't see people interested. I didn't see people chasing after to find out more information, which is all available and free. So I was a little frustrated. And so one night I was talking with my babysitter, and I have 2 young kids, 2 young boys. And she asked me, knowing what I was doing, she asked me, if her shampoo was safe. And I looked at her and I thought, oh my God, I'm missing right under my nose. I'm missing a population of young people that really might like this information, but I didn't know. So then I started working with a local high school. One of the heads of science was, really transformative in letting me into the school to do some work there and took data down and try to figure out. And it turns out it was an overwhelming success in the sense that they wanted this information. People felt compelled to use it, to learn it, to look up their products. They were learning about drinking water, soccer turf, vaping, mental health, and our environmental chemicals, which is so critical in young people, of course, everyone now, of course. Yeah. But it was just a turning point, because once I knew there was interest, I did another pilot project to confirm it. And then I realized I could kind of take this show on the road and try to get some funding. And so that's where we're at now. I'm trying to work with a major university, get some great funding, and see how to put this into a curriculum that, is not only for the higher socioeconomic areas of our country, but also lower socioeconomic, maybe with less access to organic food or to organic products. And so I think that's the trick, is to make sure the messaging is to everybody, not just people with money or people who may have a little bit more access to different quality foods and drinking water.
Mm-hmm. So this leads me to my next question, which is, and I have a daughter who is pregnant, so we are talking about this, and I advise her to buy some books and, get informed about how she's, nourishing herself during her pregnancy. But let's talk about the impact of all those chemicals on children. I mean, in the womb, but in children in general, because this podcast is about the brain, right? So toxicity, is impacting everything. But why is it so important? Not a stupid question. Why is it so important?
No, it is an excellent question. I think we don't put too much thought into it in general. We get very excited about pregnancies, but we get excited about the concept of a pregnancy and don't always know the nuances, because why should we? We assume the government or the products are safe on the shelf.
Yes.
And there's a whole, by the way, chapter on what parents and parents to be need to understand about environmental chemicals, and a very simple kind of way to look at expecting babies, and then also how to get pregnant and keep your body clean when you're in the process of trying to get pregnant. So, really we need to think about pregnancy in the sense that we used to believe that the placenta kind of protected a growing fetus from all of the ills, whether it was alcohol, which was controversial for years, as especially as a French woman who drinks wine. It was considered good for you to drink with alcohol at one point worldwide. Smoking became an issue, because we're now starting to see that the placenta was not evolutionarily designed to protect from modern day chemicals. Mm-hmm. We've designed very, very clever chemicals that have the ability to cross into the placenta from the mother's body, the mother's exposure, whether she understands she's being exposed or not. Could be from air quality and where she lives, from air pollution. But it could be from food. It could be from, lotions and creams that feel good when you put them on. So knowing that the placenta does not necessarily protect all chemicals, then you're talking about a brain that's developing, among other parts, mind you, because we have male genitalia and female genitalia that can be affected by endocrine disrupting chemicals, or chemicals that have been shown to affect genitalia of the males and some females during development. But the brain, which is so vulnerable, and we have to get it right? We want to get it right. Over 250,000 neurons are being created every minute of an entire pregnancy. And so, as many researchers have noted, That could be really critical when it comes to how those neurons are laid down, whether the myelination is done properly. And we don't know what's going to happen until the baby comes out and we start doing cognitive testing serially at different age developmental points in development and growth after birth. So, one of the key things is, well, we can't always be perfect. We can't live in always the right place. And maybe we have access to variable things, that are different than others, but we should be aware that crossing over matters. And so to be clean as much as possible means having as much clean drinking water for mom as possible. And also clean food, least processed, least pesticides as possible. And beyond that, stress. Other approaches to human health are getting proper sleep. Sleep is developmentally meant to help clear chemicals at night. Managing stress. I mean, we now know from the Dutch hunger, which if you read about is quite interesting, that stress in utero plays out into health conditions later on in life. And so we want to make sure that even just emotional stress, which is really tough right now, yes. As your daughter is probably experiencing, that emotional stress may not be controllable, but we need to manage as best we can with under the circumstances.
Well, I was doing my research for this interview, and I was reading the correlation between the increased exposure to all those toxic chemicals and an increase in children in autism, ADHD, and other, as you said, cognitive issues. So can you elaborate a little bit on this? And what really do you really have to avoid? I mean, you said eat organic, drink clean water, but what's your advice?
Yeah, and I say eat organic when accessible. We now have a lot of big box stores that sell frozen organics, which are cheaper and still maintain all of their nutrient value because they're flash frozen. Okay. So I want people who may have no access to fresh or routinely fresh vegetables and fruits, but think about frozen organics. And I think that's really important. And also you can wash conventional produce, meaning non-organic produce, in 1 part white vinegar to 3 or 4 parts clean warm water. Or you can use baking soda and you can agitate the produce and a lot of the residues come off. So again, part of the communication skills to all populations is to teach everyone an option to have cleaner bodies. In utero, we think about things like plastic chemicals, maybe pesticides, but there's also heavy metals. So drinking water with lead, things that are neurotoxins by definition. I mean, there's no safe level of lead consumption in the human body. And when you're looking at developmentally these vulnerable periods where growth is really taking off in utero, toddlers, teenagers, even during menopause, those are hormonally very vulnerable times. That's when many of the endocrine disrupting chemicals can have effect, and also, of course, heavy metals, which also can act like endocrine disruptors. So, the way I look at it, because it's very overwhelming, and I'm hoping not to make that overwhelming for people, is that you start simple. You start very simple, and you think about the things you do every day, and you pick one thing a week or one thing a month to work on. And that's how I continue to work, because it's just overwhelming to me. So for instance, I consider drinking water really critical.
That was my next question. You wanted to cover that. So let's talk about water.
It's interesting. There's just so many topics, to talk about between air quality and products and food and whatever. But what's risen to the top, in my personal opinion, is water, because by body mass index, we drink more water per body mass index than even the food we consume. We drink water repetitively throughout the day, even if it's in drinks that we're not really where water is in, coffee, tea, iced tea, that kind of thing. And we can't live without water. Within 3 or 4 days, we'd be dead. So we need water more so than even food that we can live without for at least 10 days or so, depending. So, the idea that it's so critical and it makes up 80% of our body tissue, including our brain, really behooves us to think about, well, what's the cleanest water and a consistent way of getting clean water into our body that's not cost prohibitive, that allows us to buy the right contraption and carry the water in plastic, and not in plastic, but in stainless steel or glass. Mm-hmm. Even if it says BPA free on a bottle, we really want to avoid plastics, because there are now so many substitute bisphenols, not just BPA, which made all the news, but now there's also BPS, BPS-IP, BPF, and they're showing some of the same, if not worse, endocrine abnormalities in the human body, and meaning they're mimickers of hormones. They mimic thyroid hormone, they mimic estrogens at low levels, and testosterone. They mimic insulin and how glucose is stored in the body because of insulin release. So all of the hormones that are signalers, that's how many of these chemicals work, is they mimic them, they hijack the body at very, very infinitesimal low levels, but they still have clinical effects on the human body that we're starting to see visibly in terms of newborns, in terms of body parts, in terms of male genitalia, but also cognition for autism. And
also fertility. I think it came from, this information came from you, that the fertility rate, the sperm count has dropped significantly in the last 20 years or something like that.
Correct. Absolutely. And so fertility is a big issue. And now it's interesting, infertility is not just a woman's problem. We're seeing the sperm count being affected. That is certainly, it's not just the sperm amount, it's the sperm quality. So a bad sperm won't make it to fertilization. The body has a way of knocking those off, the male body. But overall, we're seeing lower amounts of sperm in terms of quantity and also quality. And so that has to do in part probably to estrogen, changes, but also testosterone in the males. But here's another aspect that's interesting, and we have a whole chapter in the book: radiation. We have to think about radiation because we have plenty of international studies that are very robust, showing that people who carry their phones in their pockets, the men who carry phones in their pockets, have lower numbers and quantity and quantity and quality of sperm. We also know laptops, which draw radiation. Again, if you're doing Wi-Fi or anything that involves cellular activity, people who use laptops on their lap, it really should be on a table. And so
thank God I am not a man, because boy, I do this a lot.
Yeah. And, I walked through my kids' school when we had school, and I am just mortified by seeing so many kids with laptops on their lap.
Yeah.
And it's just a very simple change that can happen if we just instruct young people and adults. How do you use safe technology, or technology safely? And another thing for women is, a lot of women, and I wasn't really aware of this until I sort of got out there and was talking to people, but a lot of women carry their phone in their bra. In fact, a relative of mine said that they did that, and I was very shocked. And what we're seeing now is that there can be growth of tumors underneath the antenna. It's almost linked to the exact spot where the antenna, because on the phone, there can be an antenna at the top. You can actually look this up on a computer, on Google or whatever. But where the antenna is sitting tends to draw the radiation. It's a two-way communication with the cell phone tower. And it's basically signaling. And unless you turn that phone on airplane mode, which shuts off that signal, or you put it in a bag that's called a Faraday bag that completely knocks off all radiation to that phone, it's always going to have a signal. And where you store your phone, in your pocket, for people who may have pacemakers, you don't want to do that.
No.
You affect the pacemaker.
Or always too close to your head also,
exactly.
Right? Then you have an impact on your brain. But to go back to water, and because you are the one who taught me this, I have become very religious about it, that, we are filtering our water. We're not buying plastic bowls anymore, unless it's a question of, life and death in a trip. So everybody should have a filter at home. And plus, I don't trust the water where we live in New Jersey. And when I see some reports, it talks about lead and arsenic. So what was your advice? And we can go from a very expensive contraption to a more simpler one, but you're preaching that, right? Everybody should be filtering their water.
Yeah. And thanks for bringing me back to the topic because
Yes,
I get a little excited.
yes.
And I go off on tangents, but drinking water, back to water, it's something that everyone can afford now. Is everything from a carbon filter, a carbon block filter, which does a reasonable job of taking out some bad stuff, no question about it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's a pitcher, like a Brita or a zero
Yes.
water,
Yeah.
whether that's a carbon filter that's on a faucet, when it's attached to a faucet, some people use one of those. Or if it's in your refrigerator, whether you're putting your glass in the door of the refrigerator, and those are all very simple carbon filters. And I'm really happy when people use even that. But when people want to take it to another level, which is what I recommend, given the degree of contamination of our water,
Mm-hmm.
day to day, month to month, it changes. The chemicals that are being found are changing. And so we even have medications from sewage that make their way into our water treatment plants that get into our glass, believe it or not.
I was reading one day that the level of antidepressants in the water in Montreal, Canada, was extremely high.
Well, I should move to Montreal then. I think that's the trick.
Yeah.
Because we can all use a dose of that. But seriously, I mean, people don't. Another one of those aha moments, we have 160,000 water treatment plants, which is where our water gets cleaned in the US. And that serves about 250 million US citizens. The other 50 million out of our total of about 310 in this country get served by well water. And well water has its own issues because it doesn't require any testing of that water annually. It's recommended annually, but it's not required unless you're selling your home. Mm-hmm. So that's the only time it's actually required. The problem with that is we have changes in well water all the time because of different chemicals that get, dumped or travel or flooding or pesticides or fertilizers from, nearby farms or not even nearby. So well water and water treatment plants both have their own issues. But what my recommendation is to buy a reverse osmosis water filter, which is as close to a dialysis machine, believe it or not, for your drinking water. In fact, they use RO filters in dialysis. My dad and my brother are both nephrologists, so I know this very well. It is the most aggressive way to clean water, and in their situation, clean blood and put it back into the human body. So why shouldn't we follow that rule and try to stick with that? And so RO filters, many people think of them as like, $6,000 whole house filters. I don't have the money for that. Well, I don't either. And so what I recommend people to think about is just getting one, which are now quite accessible at $250, $300 off of Consumer Reports. They're wonderful at rating the systems. That's how we found ours. Mm-hmm. And you can buy them. They're not too large. They ship to your home. A plumber can install them under your kitchen sink. Does not take up as much room as people think. And they can put it in for about $150 in 1 hour. If they take longer than that, then you got taken. If you pay more than that, you got taken. So be a really good consumer, because when I put one in here in my office, not just at my home, I put the same one in my office. It's $250 on sale, $130 for the plumber, and it's about $40 a year or 9 months, depending on how much you use it, when you need to change out those filters. And so you end up paying it off in a couple of months if you're an avid plastic bottle user, which again, not a great choice to use plastic bottles if you can avoid that.
And it's expensive.
Correct. And I had my first one for 14 years in our home in New Jersey. We just changed out that one because I just got too complicated to see what was broken at that point. So we just said, you know what, for $250, we'll just start over again. And they're much cheaper now than they were back then. It was like a VHS machine, they go down every year until they're like ridiculous. Everyone should have them. So, I tell this to every community, even lower economic, socioeconomic communities, because I'm watching these communities go out and buy their own plastic bottles. And it pains me to see that. Yeah. And they can save money by putting one of these in, assuming they're stable in their home and not moving to any other places. It just makes sense to me.
Yeah, $300 is 300 or even less bottles. So, and that goes very quickly in a household or a community. Now, I want to make sure we talk about your next book. you've been working with the same co-author. It's the non-toxic guide to living healthy in a chemical world. I'm excited. I can't wait to get that book. You send me a picture. So what's in that book?
So I thought I would break it down into very simple bites. So each chapter, first chapter is on what are endocrine disrupting chemicals and what's the history of plastics. But then we move into a whole chapter on drinking water, a whole chapter on personal care products, not only what the problem is, but the solutions. A whole chapter on what to think about if you're wanting to become pregnant in terms of our environment, and what to think about when you have children in terms of what you should be thinking of for their environment. There's a whole chapter on pesticides, and then the what to do. There's a whole chapter on detox. I'm an integrative medicine doctor in addition to environmental health and an autoimmune disease doctor. So I'm constantly thinking about this for my patients, as well as people I reach out to on social media through the Smart Human, as I post, is what are our natural mechanisms for detox? I mean, do we really need to do these rinses and scrubs and, I don't know, there's all sorts of, juicing and, starvation. And it's just, it gets a little crazy. Not that they're all bad. It's just that I want people to utilize anthropology, which is my favorite thing to think about, is that we've evolved for millions of years to sweat out a lot of our toxins and chemicals. Our liver was built that way, our lymphatic system, our kidneys. And so when you exercise, I talk about why and how it works on these chemicals. When we use sauna, how that works. If you're not physically able to exercise, you want to have another option, and saunas are wonderful. They've been around for thousands of years. Drinking water is critical because you're flushing out daily exposures from air pollution, even indoor air pollution, which is our air fresheners and our carpet cleaners and our cleaning products that aerate off. So, we want to remove products from our lives, not buy them. That's first step. And then we want to actively consider making 1 or 2 changes per month, and then all the while just trying to cleanse our body through natural processes. Not expensive, and it's free. Nature is free.
So what are the steps you've taken at home? Like you say you have several, what would be the first 3 steps you would recommend somebody? And also my next question will be, where are the trusted source of information besides you and your books? Like the EWG, is this a good?
Yes. So yeah, and we lay this out. I don't do promotion of any brands because of the work I do academically. So the book is really about giving you the best resources to go right to the spot of what you're looking for, whether it's looking up a couch without flame retardant chemicals, which manufacturers do that. I want you to have accessible information that doesn't take a lot of work to get to, or else what's the point? Yeah. But when it comes to resources, EWG is a wonderful resource. Environmental Working Group is what it stands for, ewg.org. They also have an app called Healthy Living, which is very usable. It's free, and you can actually go into stores and use their barcode to zap in a product. You can also type in your own product that you use every day. And so that's one great resource, but there's also many others. Even our government has resources, believe it or not. They're excellent resources. cdc.gov is a wonderful resource. NRDC is a wonderful, and depending on what the topic is, I hone in on the best resources at the end of each chapter. So I'm trying to not make it a big, big search problem so you can get information quickly. So what do we do at home? The first thing I did, and I'm very clear on this, is I just started throwing stuff out. I mean, I just was so overwhelmed by what I was reading and learning about that I just started tossing stuff. And I must have had the biggest trash can full of junk you can imagine. In fact, I remember one drawer in my kitchen that had probably 45 different plug-in air fresheners and Ocean Breeze and Raspberry Tart and and I was like, must have been so excited to smell all this stuff. Even as a pregnant woman, I was like, woo, but I remember thinking to myself the day I removed them, it was so refreshing. I also had a ton of free samples from all of the different cosmetic sellers in the mall,
Yes.
or from buying Mother's Day gifts or what have you. And I had literally hundreds of little sample sizes of the most toxic junk you can imagine. At that time, I didn't think so.
Mm-hmm.
And I got rid of an entire floor. I covered my floor with all of these products, and I snapped a picture. So, it's cathartic, but there are just better choices. They're safer. And you can learn that through ewg.org/skin deep. And that's the site for cosmetics and personal care products, skin tanners, hair conditioners. It's remarkable what they have on that, on their site. So yeah, I mean, it's mostly tossing. And then what do I bring in that's going to give me cleaner water? What's going to be my water system,
Yes.
that I'm doing from now onward?
Mm-hmm.
What are my pots and pans that I'm going to cook with now? I got rid of spatulas and all my plastic cookware. Not that I cook that much, but when I did, it was with plastic. And I think we all got into, lulled into that sense of safety.
Yeah, we got rid of all our plastic container and are using glass containers now in the kitchen.
Yeah, and those plastic containers for our food and drinks, people don't realize even the BPA that's still in canned foods, they contribute to weight gain. So you with your Cogni diet work that you're doing, it's really fascinating that it's not just the quality of our food. It's what we carry it in.
Yes.
It's what we cook it in.
Yes.
It's what we stir it with.
Yeah.
And I think when we think about that, it just changes the perspective, because many of those chemicals that are endocrine disruptors like phthalates and BPA, they get into the food you cook, especially if they're fatty foods, because these chemicals love fat. And because they love acidic foods. So acidity actually can pull off more bisphenol A within a canned food. So you want to look for foods that are made, and packaged in jars, if at all possible.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Aly, for all this wealth of information. And what are your, I want to finish this wonderful interview with, what are your pearls of wisdom, or your, your final goodbye advice to the audience? I'm sure they're going to love this conversation. Give us hope.
I will give you hope, and I put in my favorite prayer in the book, because it means so much to me and to what I teach patients and the audience of The Smart Human on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, is the serenity prayer. I want people to know to take a deep breath, to know you got this. There are some things you may not change right now. My hair coloring, for instance, is something I still like to do. But I like to rationalize that the rest of my life may be a lot less toxic with my behavioral changes. So, I want people to just realize this can be done. It's a journey for everyone, and there's no judgment. It's about doing what's right for you and your family in reasonable ways that make them stick. It's not a diet. It's a lifestyle of cleaning out chemicals from your life and also making better choices moving forward. That is all it is. And again, I try to help people with these small nuggets of information on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. I post on Facebook. I think it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday consistently.
And they're all called the Smart Human, right? Instagram, yeah. Facebook is the Smart Human, and you share a lot of great information. So I'm encouraging everybody to follow you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And I work hard at them, and I edit them. And if something doesn't seem right, I go back in. And I really try to make each one a little teeny masterpiece of an idea, but it's attached to articles that are worth reading, but it has the bulleted information. We're all busy. I'm a busy mom in addition to work. And, I just know people don't have the time to sift through, lots of information, and they really just want a good bite-sized chunk. And I'm trying to give that to people so that they make good decisions and don't hurt themselves or their families. So people should be encouraged to either, follow there, or thesmarthuman.com has a lot of posts, but also radio shows and cool resources. So, I would love people just to take a deep breath and really say, you know what, we got a lot on our plate, worldwide pandemic. Let's take it little by little, and try to just be kind to each other, survive, and really come out of this better than we were, if it's all possible.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Aly. This was the podcast, Make Your Brain Happy. I'm happier today after this interview, and thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Veronique, for having me. It was fun.
Thank you for joining us for the Make Your Brain Happy podcast. This episode was recorded by Veronique Cardone and produced by HG Media. If you enjoy our podcast, please share it with your friends. You can find our podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you listen to podcasts.